I want to look with you at one of the Pilgrim Psalms, one of the songs of degrees, nestling in the heart of that wonderful book. And our psalm is Psalm number 134. 131. 131. It's only 3 verses, so I'll read the whole psalm. A song of degrees of David. Lord, my heart is not haughty, nor mine eyes lofty. Neither do I exercise myself in great matters, or in things too high for me. Surely I have behaved and quieted myself as a child that is weaned of his mother. My soul is even as a weaned child. Let Israel hope in the Lord from henceforth and forever. This short and very precious psalm is one of the shortest psalms in the group known as the Pilgrim Psalms, or the Songs of Ascents. Psalms that were traditionally sung by pilgrims as they made their way to Jerusalem for the 3 great festivals of the Jewish year. The Feast of Passover. And the Feast of Passover was a feast of remembrance. It brought to their mind, it was a reminder to them of how the Lord had delivered them from the slavery and bondage they were in Egypt. And the second of those 3 feasts was the Feast of Pentecost, sometimes known as the Feast of Weeks. And that was a time of observing and thanking the Lord for his faithful provision for his people. The provision for all their needs. They had been delivered, they looked back, they looked at the present and the Lord's provision day by day. And then there was the 3rd great festival, the Feast of Tabernacles, which was looking forward to the future fulfillment of all God's plan and purpose for his people. And this Psalm 131 is one of such psalms. It's also one of the 4 out of the 14 psalms that is actually attributed to David. And when I say these things to you this evening, just think, pause and think. If you are a pilgrim on the way to the heavenly Jerusalem, if you are a Christian on the way to glory, then it is good for you to look back at how the Lord delivered you and put you on the right path. It is good for you, even today, to look around you in your present circumstances, whatever they might be, and acknowledge and thank the Lord for his goodness and provision. And then, of course, as you look back and as you look at the present, there is the future, and it beckons to you. And it's always good for us to look forward to what the Lord has promised us and has gained for us in and through the great work of his redeeming love. But as I look at this psalm again, it is a psalm for the children of Israel corporately. But it's an interesting psalm because it doesn't use corporate language. It uses personal language. It's a personal psalm. It's a song between me and my Lord. Lord, my heart, my eyes, things too profound for me, I have calmed and quieted myself. And who is the psalmist addressing? Lord, look, my heart is not haughty, and so on. It's a song between me and my Lord. And at the same time, brief as it is, it expresses a personal confidence and a personal trust in the Lord. Here is the pilgrim and his fellow pilgrims, and they are singing together, and they are singing personally to the Lord, and they're expressing their confidence in him and their trust. And that's what we need to do regularly in our life's journey. So the title for my ministry this evening is a very simple one: The Christian's Quiet Trust. The Christian's quiet trust. And in the 3 verses, I want to just think of 3 things about what it means to trust in the Lord. And that's why I read that lovely passage from Proverbs chapter 3. You will have noticed, and it was interesting in your pulpit Bible here, it was actually marked. It's a favourite passage of mine personally. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will direct your path. That's a lovely couple of verses. We are to trust the Lord wholeheartedly. We're not to put any confidence in man. And in everything we are to try and observe and acknowledge the hand of God. And when we do that, we find we're going in the right direction. We're going towards not Jerusalem as these pilgrims were, but the heavenly Jerusalem at the end of our time on earth. So from this psalm, 3 things, positive things, about the Christian's trust. And they're fairly obvious if you really think about it. The first thing I want to observe is that the quiet trust that is ours, quiet trust, is humble. Quiet trust in the Lord is humble. David is very clear about that as he addresses the Lord in the presence of his fellow pilgrims. He begins with his heart. What does he have to say about his heart? Lord, my heart is not haughty. My heart isn't lifted up with pride. Or as the verse in Proverbs says, it's trust in the Lord with all your heart. So there's a completeness here. Lord, my heart is a humble heart. Real trust and real confidence begins within us. It begins within. Where is your heart? It's within you. It is beating. It is, we talk about the heartbeat. It's a vital part of us. And the problem is, too often we have a proud heart. It may not be a great ostentatious sort of pride, but I'm all right, really. I know what I'm doing. But no, true trust, quiet trust is humble. It has no trust. This heart has no trust in its own thoughts. It has no trust in its own words. It has no confidence in its own actions. It recognizes that from God's perspective, the heart is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. That was Jeremiah, wasn't it? And when he said that he didn't just make the statement, the heart is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. He asks a question. Who can understand it? Who can know it? Who can grasp the deceitfulness of our hearts? You see, the pilgrim, the Christian pilgrim, accepts that unless there is a humble heart, someone is absent. Unless there is a humble heart, God is not with him. For thus says the high and lofty one, God, the one who inhabits eternity, whose name is holy. What does he say? I dwell with him who has a contrite and a humble spirit. I am with him to revive that spirit, to revive the spirit of the humble, and to revive the heart of the contrite ones. How do we know whether we've got such a heart? Well, David's, the pilgrim's trusting heart, finds expression. It finds expression in his outlook. He says, my heart is not a proud heart, it's not haughty, and it shows because my eyes are not lofty. I'm not strutting around with my head in the air. My eyes are not lofty. He is like the tax collector in the parable that our Lord taught. You'll remember the publican. There's the Pharisee and there's a publican in the temple praying. And which one went home justified? Which one went home with joy in his heart? Of course, it was the tax collector. He would not do what? He would not so much as raise his eyes to heaven. But he beat on his breast and said, God be merciful to me, a sinner. That's where David was. That's how pilgrims live their lives. Their eyes are not lofty. They can't look up. And yet they do. The only upward look of this psalm is not that he was looking up to the hills. The set of psalms right near the beginning, Psalm 121, I will lift up my eyes to the hills. But that's not what the psalmist is actually saying there. He's saying, I will look up towards the hills and I'll look beyond the hills. I will look up to the one who rides upon the mountains, who made heaven and earth. He's not looking at the hills, but the one who is above the hills. And all this is consistent with his attitude. Look at his attitude there in verse 1. I don't concern myself, he says, with great matters. I don't worry myself with things that are too profound for me. Paul, he reminds New Testament pilgrims, we walk by faith and not by sight. There are many great matters. There are many things that are too profound for us, aren't there, in our lives as Christians? We look beyond the hills to our God who rides and sits upon the mountains. And we walk by faith in him, not on the basis of what I see, not on the basis of what I think about things, not on the basis of what I understand about what's happening. No, there are experiences we cannot and dare not lean on our own understanding. That's Proverbs 3 again. We don't lean on our own understanding. Look at Job. Job, he confessed he does great things past finding out. He does wonders without number. I don't understand, he says. I don't understand what's happening to me. He's lost his family, he's lost his business, he's lost his crops, he's lost everything. And even his wife has turned against him. And his friends, well, we use the term a Job's comforter. They're no comforters at all. And he can't even find comfort in his God. But what does he say? Though he slay me, I don't understand. I don't concern myself with these great matters. I don't concern myself with those things that I don't understand. I will trust him. That's true faith. That's what it is to walk by faith. Humbly, not proudly, not concerning ourselves with the whys and the wherefores of everything. He will make it plain. Didn't William Cooper know that? God is his own interpreter. He will make it plain. It's not for me to work out what's happening and why it's happening and all the rest of it. So here is this pilgrim. And he's saying, I trust, I've got a quiet confidence in the Lord. There's no other way. Trust and obey. There's no other way. That's how we have to live as pilgrims in this dangerous world. We go through many changing scenes in life, don't we? And it begins very early on in our lives. Changes happen. Changes take place and we don't know what to do. We don't know how to handle it. But quiet trust isn't lifted up. We have a humble heart. We have an upward look and yet not a lofty look. And we walk by faith, just as David did, just as Paul did, just as multitudes before us have done, and just how we should walk as well. Now, I don't know what things may be concerning and troubling you tonight, but this is the way to face them. This is the way to handle them. But trust that is a humble trust bears a second characteristic that comes out in verse 2 of this song. Quiet trust is humble, and quiet trust is content. Contentment. Let me just read verse 2 again. Surely I have calmed and quieted my soul. Like a weaned child with his mother, like a weaned child is my soul within me. The pilgrim life is likened to a weaning process. Listen to David as he speaks of it as such. As I read this verse and meditated on it, I thought, whatever do we draw from this? And there are two hymns, a couple of verses that helped me grasp it. And I just share them with you. John Berridge wrote these words. Weaned from my lordly self, weaned from the miser's pelf, weaned from the scorner's ways, weaned from the lust of praise. Make me like a little child, of my strength and wisdom spoiled, seeing only in thy light, walking only in thy might, leaning on thy loving breast, where a weary soul may rest, feeling well the peace of God flowing from thy precious blood. It was the first couple of lines that grasped me. Weaned from my lordly self, weaned from the miser's pelf or the miser's grasping attitude, weaned from the scorner's ways, and weaned from the lust or the longing for praise. And then an old Methodist hymn put it like this. Lord, if thou thy grace impart, poor in spirit, meek in heart, I shall, as my master, be rooted in humility, simple, teachable and mild, changed into a little child, pleased with all the Lord provides, weaned from all the world besides. Now those two verses have got the word weaning in. David says he has been and still is going through such a process. As are we all. That is the Christian life. Moving further and further away from self, moving further and further away from the scorner and his ridicule, moving on from the desire to be thought well of, walking in such a way that we're leaving the world itself behind us. A weaning process. It's a gradual process, isn't it? And David says, that's what I'm going through in my journey of life. It's a distressing process. The humbling process of sanctification is rarely an easy one, but it is a vital one. Walking by faith is rarely comfortable to the flesh. You mothers, you have had children, you have had babes, and they have had to be weaned. It was distressing for you. It was distressing for the child. There's a break beginning to happen, isn't there? A dependence is being weakened. And it's a vital part of childish development. Yes, it's distressing. Our dependence on the world is decreasing. That's hard, isn't it? To be moving further away from the way the world is behaving. Is it not a painful process, a distressing process, as our dependence on the Lord increases? Think of Job again. Think of what he was losing. Think of what those first couple of days in that experience were and meant to him. Everything was being stripped away. Everything that he relied on was being taken away. And he was being made more and more and more dependent on his God. You see, as our dependence on one thing decreases, our dependence on another increases. Listen to Paul. When Paul was writing to the church at Philippi, let us take his words to heart. For me to live is Christ. To die is gain. And that was a process that was taking place throughout his life. I've already mentioned Job. Weaned away from his family. Weaned away from his possessions. Weaned away from his health. Even from his wife and his friends. And that is the first part of the process, isn't it? Of weaning. But there's a positive side, isn't there? What's the blessed outcome for the weaning process? What was it for Job and for David? Very simply, the Lord restored Job's losses. In fact, he had twice as much as he had before. And David could sing of an inner calmness and quietness as a result of this weaning process. It's interesting. If you look at the word weaned in Psalm 131, it's in the past tense. It's something that has happened. Like a weaned, not like a child being weaned, but a child that has been weaned. He's still with his mother. Like a weaned child is my soul within me. It's been put like this, and it was very sweet as I read it. The weaned baby no longer draws its sustenance from the mother's breast, but rests there in contentment after weaning. Isn't that a lovely thought? It's painful to go through the process, but when the process is achieved, there's a wonderful rest. And so it is in the Christian life, isn't it? Have you not proved it, brother and sister? When you have been drawn away from those things that you've got to leave behind to grow up in the Christian faith, you have not been the loser by it in the long run. And mother still embraces her child, but there's a difference now. It's so sweet and it's so wonderful when you really think it through. It's like that with the pilgrim in his and her journey. We're able to look towards the destination with a new sense of security and hope. Though painful at present, that's the weaning process. 'Twill cease before long. And then, oh, how pleasant the conqueror's song. The psalm here, the pilgrim's trust in the Lord who set him on pilgrimage, is deepened by the weaning process. His trust is taken away from those temporal things and temporary things, and his trust is now rooted in that which is substantial and eternal. You can see then how progress is made. From reading and effectively singing these pilgrim psalms, from receiving the exhortations, this quiet trust becomes a timeless trust. Quiet trust is humble, it is quiet, and it is timeless. Think about that. David encourages his fellow pilgrims now in the very last verse. O Israel, hope in the Lord from this time forth and forever. Many pilgrims have drawn encouragement from Job and David, amongst others, from reading and effectively singing these psalms. And they come to this word. Here's an encouragement for those going through the process. Hope in the Lord. Turn your eyes upon Jesus. Look full in his wonderful face. And what happens? You become weaned from all the other things. The things of earth will grow strangely dim in the light of his glory, his beauty, his grace, in the light of him himself. The trusting traveller to glory travels on so securely now. He's left something behind and he's reaching out to something ahead. His hope and his trust in the Lord is renewed. He's not only been brought through the weaning process, through the present experience securely, but he knows that his new security is for the duration of the journey and the future glory. He knows he will have that Saviour with him all the way through. And the time will come from this time forth and forever. Jehovah never fails his pilgrim people. That's the whole point of the psalm. Jehovah never lets his people down. He has to take them through those weaning experiences to bring them to that place where they are no longer concerned with great matters, no longer digging and delving in things that they don't really need to know, those things that are too profound. He can now go on and on until he reaches the destination. And friend, we must go on, trusting in the Lord with confident hope. We do not have an earthly goal in view, but an eternal goal. Not an earthly Jerusalem, but the heavenly city. That place where we shall see him as he is, and we'll praise him as we ought. Fellow pilgrim, let us humble ourselves like a weaned child under the mighty hand of God, that he may exalt us in due time. Let us be those casting all our care upon him, for he cares for us like a nursing mother does her baby. And when that baby is weaned, that baby enjoys a whole new and different, and in some ways even closer, relationship with its mother. And one day we shall see the one in whom we've trusted as he is, and be with him forever and ever. What a prospect for pilgrims.